2 months earlier. The sound of a child's laughter floated through the sunlit courtyard of the community center. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, and the scent of cotton candy clung to the air like a memory from childhood. Caroline stood near the lemonade table, arms crossed lightly, watching Oliver chase bubbles with other kids. He was giggling, cheeks flushed, his skinny legs pumping hard as he tried to catch the shimmering orbs before they popped. It was a rare moment of peace. For the past year, since the divorce, life had felt like patching holes in a sinking boat, always trying to keep things from falling apart. Bills, exhaustion, the aching loneliness that crept in after bedtime stories. She had learned to carry it all. Quietly. "Your son?" a voice asked, smooth and warm. She turned. A man stood beside her. Tall, mid-30s maybe, with kind eyes and a button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves. He smiled, not too wide, not performative. Just, genuine. "Yeah," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Oliver. He's 6. Obsessed with dinosaurs and peanut butter sandwiches." The man chuckled. "A solid foundation for any young man." She smiled politely. "And you? Volunteer?" He nodded. "Edward. I help with the weekend literacy program here. I read a lot of Where the Wild Things Are." He mimed holding up a tiny book, complete with monster voice. Caroline laughed despite herself. It had been a while since someone made her laugh like that. They chatted for 10, maybe 15 minutes, about books, work, the chaos of parenting. There was no flirting, not really. Just an easy rhythm. A breath of air after months underwater. When she finally turned back to look for Oliver, she was surprised to see him standing nearby, holding the hem of her jacket. He was staring at Edward. "Hey, buddy," Edward said gently, crouching to his eye level. "You're a fast runner." Oliver didn't reply, just pressed against Caroline's side and looked away. "He's shy," she said quickly. "Takes him a minute." Edward nodded and stood. "That's okay. I don't rush anyone." It was a simple thing to say. But it stayed with her that night, when she lay in bed listening to the silence of her apartment. She thought about how rare it was to feel seen without being sized up. The next weekend, Edward was there again. And the next. After a while, they started texting. Nothing serious. A funny meme here. How was your day, there?" She didn't tell many people. Not because she was hiding anything, but because it felt delicate, like a bird perched on her palm. She was afraid to move too fast and make it fly away. One evening, after a long day at work and an even longer bedtime routine, Edward showed up with takeout. "You look like someone who hasn't eaten anything but goldfish crackers all day," he said, holding up a bag with warm containers inside. Caroline blinked at him in surprise. "How do you know I love pad thai?" He gave a playful shrug. "Lucky guess. It should have felt too much. It should have felt like a red flag. But instead, it felt considerate. Like someone had finally noticed how tired she was." They ate on the couch, watching some forgettable sitcom. He didn't try anything. Just leaned back, laughed at the dumb jokes, and told her she deserved to relax. At the end of the night, as he slipped on his coat, he glanced toward Oliver's bedroom. "He's a good kid," he said. "You're doing an amazing job, Caroline." The way he said her name, it was the first time in a long while she'd felt like more than just someone's mother. When she closed the door behind him, she leaned her forehead against the wood and let herself smile. A small, cautious smile. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. The following weeks passed like something out of someone else's life, a good life. The kind Caroline used to watch in commercials and quietly resent. Edward became a steady presence. Not overwhelming, not intrusive, just there. Picking up a coffee for her when she forgot breakfast. Helping Oliver with his math homework. fixing the leaky faucet she'd been avoiding for 3 months. He had this calmness about him, a kind of quiet certainty that made things feel less chaotic. Caroline found herself laughing more, sleeping better, dreaming again. And Oliver, well, he tolerated him. Which, for a 6-year-old, wasn't nothing. Sometimes Oliver would sit in the same room with them, building Lego towers while Edward talked about his job or asked Caroline about hers. Other times, he'd retreat to his room, closing the door just enough to send a message. "He's still adjusting," Caroline would say, feeling the need to explain. "He's protective of me." Edward always nodded, never pressed. "It's okay," he'd say. "He'll come around. Kids feel things we don't." One Friday evening, Edward offered to pick Oliver up from school. Caroline hesitated. "I don't know. He's not great with surprises." Edward smiled. "I'll text ahead, promise. I'll be the least surprising surprise ever." She gave in. And to her surprise, Oliver came home in one piece, quiet but unharmed. Later that night, Caroline asked, "How was your day, kiddo?" Oliver shrugged. "Fine." She ruffled his hair. "Did Edward say anything weird?" Oliver paused. Then shook his head. "No. He just drives quiet." She made a note to herself. "Nothing alarming. Just a bit odd." A few nights later, Edward stayed for dinner. It was spaghetti and meatballs, Oliver's favorite. But Oliver barely touched his plate. "Not hungry?" Caroline asked. He shook his head, eyes down. "Maybe he's just tired," Edward offered. Caroline nodded. But something tugged at her. A small thread she couldn't name. When she put Oliver to bed that night, she lingered by the doorway. "You okay, sweetheart?" Oliver nodded. "You sure?" He bit his lip. "Can you leave the door open tonight?" She tilted her head. "You haven't asked for that in a long time." "I know." Her hand froze on the light switch. "Did something happen?" A long pause. Then. "No. I had a bad dream, that's all." She tucked him in tighter and left the door open a crack. But the thread from earlier, it was still tugging. A week passed. One afternoon, as she picked up Oliver's laundry from the floor, she noticed something. A small bruise, bluish, oval, just above his elbow. Her breath caught. "Oliver," she called gently. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up from his book. "This bruise, did you fall? At recess?" He stared at her for a moment. Then, too quickly, "Yeah. On the jungle gym." She nodded. Too calmly. "Okay." But after he turned back to his book, she just stood there, frozen. The bruise wasn't where a fall would land. It was too clean. Too intentional. That night, she sat up in bed long after everyone else was asleep, scrolling through articles she didn't want to read. Signs of abuse. Child trauma indicators. Trusting your instincts. A sentence stayed with her. The most dangerous kind of harm is the kind that hides behind kindness. And though she told herself it was nothing, probably nothing, a single question began to root itself deep in her mind. What if I've let someone in who should never have crossed our doorstep? Caroline couldn't stop thinking about the bruise. She kept trying to explain it away. Maybe Oliver had fallen. Maybe it was from playing too rough. Maybe he was just too clumsy lately. Kids bruise easily, don't they? But the thought wouldn't let her go. It was like a splinter under her skin, small, barely visible, but impossible to forget once you'd felt it. The next time Edward came over, he brought Oliver a gift, a box of colored pencils and a brand new sketch pad. "Every great artist starts young," he said with a grin, handing it to him like a magician revealing a prize. Oliver took it hesitantly. "Say thank you," Caroline said. "Thanks," the boy murmured, but his voice lacked warmth. Later that evening, when Caroline peeked into his room, she found the sketchpad shoved under the bed. The pencils were untouched. 2 days later, she was tidying up and found a drawing, one Oliver had left crumpled at the bottom of his backpack. It was rough, scrawled in quick, jerky strokes. A small figure with wide, fearful eyes stood next to a taller one, all in black. The taller figure had long arms, sharp hands, and no face. Just a big, scribbled-out circle where a face should have been. Caroline stared at it. It was just a drawing. Kids drew weird things all the time. Monsters, shadows, imaginary enemies. But why were the small figure's hands shaking? Why did it look so much like Oliver? She showed it to him at dinner. "Hey," she said gently, "I found this in your bag." "What's it about?" Oliver barely looked up. "It's just a monster." "From where?" "Nowhere. Just a dream." His tone was clipped, robotic. And his hand curled around his fork like he was bracing for something. Edward, across the table, laughed softly. "Looks pretty creepy. You've got a wild imagination, kiddo." But Caroline noticed how Oliver's shoulders tensed at the sound of Edward's voice. Just for a second. That night, after Edward left, Caroline sat with Oliver in his bed. She read him his favorite story, the one about the tiger who couldn't sleep, but he wasn't listening. He stared at the ceiling. She closed the book and looked at him. "Do you feel safe, baby?" He blinked. Then turned his face into the pillow. "I don't want to talk about it." She swallowed hard. "You can tell me anything. You know that, right?" No answer. Just a small nod. She kissed his forehead and stayed there long after he'd closed his eyes, watching the rise and fall of his chest, her heart pounding in time with something unspoken. The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. She typed, "How to tell if your child is hiding something." Then deleted it. Typed, "Emotional abuse signs in children." Deleted that too. She didn't want to be paranoid. Didn't want to accuse someone without proof. Didn't want to see what she might already know. But denial was beginning to crack. And the cracks were letting in the cold. Caroline couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly, methodically, like a ticking clock above her. Oliver was asleep down the hall. Edward had left 2 hours ago, after another quiet dinner and a few kisses that she barely felt. She kept replaying things in her mind. The bruise. The drawing. The door left open at night. The stiffness in Oliver's posture when Edward entered the room. She didn't want to believe it. She hated herself for even thinking it. But what if? What if she was wrong in the worst possible way, not for suspecting, but for ignoring? The next day, while Oliver was at school, she went to the store. She didn't buy much. Just groceries. And a tiny, inconspicuous nanny cam that looked like a smoke detector. Her hands trembled slightly when she pulled it from the packaging at home. She told herself she was overreacting. That she wouldn't find anything. That this was just a formality, something to ease the buzzing in her mind. But deep down, she already knew that wasn't true. She installed it in the corner of the living room. From there, it had a full view of the couch, the hallway, and part of Oliver's room if the door was open. Then she waited. On Thursday, she told Edward she had a dentist appointment that would take longer than usual. He smiled. "I can stay with Oliver if you want. Pick him up from school." Caroline hesitated. Then nodded slowly. "Yeah. That'd be great. Thanks." Her heart was thudding so hard it made her feel dizzy. She didn't go to the dentist. She drove around the block twice. Parked near the coffee shop. Waited. Watched the clock. Every minute passed like it was made of lead. 3 hours later, she came home. The apartment looked normal. Edward greeted her at the door with a kiss and a comment about how great Oliver had been. Caroline smiled. Inside, Oliver was drawing quietly. He looked up at her, gave her a small smile, but his eyes looked tired. Guarded. Something was off. She waited until Edward left. Then tucked Oliver into bed and sat at the kitchen table in silence for a long time. Finally, with shaking hands, she opened her laptop and pulled up the camera footage. At first, it was ordinary. Edward entering with Oliver, laughing. Setting down his bag. Helping Oliver take off his jacket. Fixing a snack. Then, a shift. Oliver spilled a bit of juice on the floor. He looked worried, scrambling to grab a napkin. Edward froze, watching him for a moment, then stepped forward fast. His voice was low, but sharp. Firm in a way that made Caroline's stomach clench. She turned up the volume. Are you stupid? You're not a baby. You clean it. Now. Oliver's shoulders hunched. He grabbed the napkin quickly, nodding, eyes down. Edward grabbed his arm, not too hard. Not violently. But too tight. Just enough. Enough to leave a mark. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. Still audible. Still cold. You don't make me look bad, understand? We've talked about this. Caroline felt like she couldn't breathe. She paused the video. Backed up. Watched it again. It was all there, coded in politeness, in smiles. A different man when no one else was looking. She pressed play again. Fast-forwarded. A later moment. Edward sitting on the couch, talking on the phone. Oliver walked by and bumped the coffee table slightly. Edward didn't even look at him. Just said, flatly. Go to your room. Oliver hesitated. Edward stood, still holding the phone, and said in a voice that chilled her to the bone. I said go. And the boy ran. Caroline slammed the laptop shut. Her hands were ice. Her breath came in short gasps. It was real. It was happening. And she had let it happen, under her roof, around her son. She felt the shame hit her like a punch. But it only lasted a second. Then came the rage. And underneath it, something even stronger, clarity. She had seen what she needed to see. Now she had to decide what to do. Caroline didn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, the video paused on a single frame, Edward's hand wrapped around Oliver's arm. It wasn't dramatic. There were no bruises blooming in real time, no screams, no slammed doors. But it was there. The control. The coldness. The fear. And Oliver, her sweet, sensitive boy, he had been shrinking in front of her for weeks. She had seen it, but hadn't wanted to believe it. Now belief wasn't a choice. The next morning, she kept Oliver home from school. They built a pillow fort in the living room. Ate cereal on the floor. Watched cartoons. Caroline tried to act normal, but she kept glancing at him, watching his expressions, listening to his laughter. It was softer now. Filtered. Can I ask you something? She said after a while, gently brushing a piece of hair from his forehead. Oliver paused, cautious. Okay. When Edward watches you, how do you feel? He looked at her, eyes big and searching. Then down at his lap. Like I can't mess up, he whispered. Her throat tightened. Why? Oliver shrugged. But it wasn't careless. It was defensive. He gets mad when I do things wrong, he added. Even little things. He says I have to learn. Did he ever hurt you? A beat. No, Oliver said quickly. Then, quieter. Not really. That, not really, cut deeper than anything else. Caroline called her friend, Mia, that afternoon. Mia was a social worker who had seen things, real things. Harsh things. She didn't give many details, just enough to sketch the outline. "There's a man I let into our lives," Caroline said, her voice low. "And I think he's scaring my son. I think it's more than just words." Mia didn't hesitate. "Do you have any kind of proof?" Caroline nodded, even though Mia couldn't see her. "Video. From a camera I installed." "Then you need to report it," Mia said. "Even if he hasn't laid a hand on him. Psychological harm is still harm." Caroline exhaled slowly. I let him in. I trusted him. What does that say about me?" Mia's voice softened. "It says you're human. And the most important thing? You're seeing it now. You're protecting your kid. That's what matters." That night, Caroline didn't answer Edward's call. Or the text that followed. "Everything okay? Haven't heard from you today." She stared at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then she turned the phone over and let it buzz against the table like a trapped wasp. The next day, she went to the police. She showed them the footage. Told them everything, her voice calm but shaking in places. They took her statement. Said they would follow up. That Edward wouldn't be allowed near Oliver in the meantime. It didn't make her feel safer. Not really. Because the worst part wasn't what had already happened. The worst part was how easily he'd gotten in. How perfectly he'd built the illusion. How gently he'd slipped past every wall she thought she had. That evening, as the sun began to dip behind the rooftops, her phone rang again. "Edward." She let it ring. Then, finally, on the sixth call, she answered. "Hey," she said, voice neutral. "Hey," Edward replied. "You okay? You've been distant." Caroline didn't answer right away. She could hear traffic in the background. The faint sound of his breath. "We need to talk," she said. There was a pause. "Sure," he said. "I can come over." "No," she said firmly. "Not here." Another pause. Then a shift in his voice. Less warm. More measured. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," she said. "And I think you already know what." Silence. Then. "I think you're making a mistake." Her grip tightened around the phone. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." She hung up. And then, for the first time in weeks, she felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Not shame. Not doubt. Resolve. 3 days passed. No texts. No calls. The silence was worse than the messages. It was heavy, deliberate. The kind of silence that made Caroline check the locks 3 times before bed, and stare through the peephole every time footsteps echoed in the hallway. She didn't tell Oliver everything, just that Edward wouldn't be coming around anymore. He didn't ask why. But he slept better. He started humming to himself again. That alone told her she'd made the right choice. On the 4th day, Caroline left the apartment for 10 minutes, just a quick run to the pharmacy down the block while Mia sat with Oliver. She checked the lock. Double-checked it. Nothing felt safe anymore, but she had to try. When she came back, something was wrong. Nothing was broken. Nothing was stolen. But the front door was slightly off. Not visibly. Just felt different. Too light when it opened. The chain lock hanging limp, like it had been tested. She looked around. Living room. Kitchen. Hall. Then her heart stopped. Oliver's drawing, the one with the faceless man, was gone from the fridge. She called the police. They came. Took fingerprints. Asked questions. Promised to investigate. But without hard evidence of a break-in, there wasn't much they could do. Caroline didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch with a kitchen knife in her lap, every light on in the apartment, phone fully charged beside her. She kept waiting for a sound. A knock. Something. But nothing came. Until the next evening. It was raining, steady, soft, like static against the windows. Caroline was brushing Oliver's teeth when the intercom buzzed. She froze. Her eyes met Oliver's in the bathroom mirror. His toothbrush hung from his mouth, foam dripping onto his pajama shirt. The buzzer rang again. Then a voice, crackling through the speaker. Caroline. I just want to talk. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. The voice again, lower this time. Calm. You don't have to be afraid. This is just a misunderstanding. Oliver spit into the sink, eyes wide. Is that him? She nodded slowly. He pressed close to her side, silent. The intercom buzzed one last time. Then silence. 15 minutes later, the doorknob turned. Soft. Subtle. But definite. Caroline's heart kicked into overdrive. She reached for her phone, whispering, "Go to my room. Lock the door. Now." Oliver ran. The doorknob stilled. Then, a knock. Just one. Then his voice, right outside. I think you're confused, Caroline. You're hurting both of us. She backed away, phone in hand, dialing. Her fingers were ice, breath short and rapid. Please don't make me do something we'll both regret. She didn't reply. Then a second knock. Louder. You need me. You know you do. Who else is going to take care of you? The final straw wasn't the words. It was the sound of the key. He'd kept one. She'd never thought to change the lock. The door began to open, slow, deliberate. Caroline screamed into the phone, "He's here. He's inside." She dropped the phone and grabbed the first thing she could, Oliver's baseball bat from the umbrella stand. Stepped into the hallway just as the door cracked open. And there he was. Edward. So calm. So clean. Like nothing was wrong. His eyes were almost kind. I told you, Caroline, he said softly. You're overreacting. And then he stepped inside. What happened next wasn't clean. Or graceful. It was instinct. She swung the bat. He caught it, but not in time to block the second blow, his shoulder crumpled under it. He cursed, reached for her, grabbed her wrist. She kicked. Hard. Screamed louder. Footsteps. Sirens. Doors in the hallway flung open. Neighbors. Edward backed away, still holding her wrist. Eyes burning. I did nothing wrong, he growled. You ruined this. Then he ran. Down the hall. Down the stairs. Gone before the police burst through the lobby. But he wouldn't get far. Because she had the video. The evidence. The 911 call. Witnesses. She had everything now. And she would never, ever let him near her child again. That night, she held Oliver close on the couch. The apartment was a mess. Her wrist was bruised. Her heart was thudding. But they were safe. He looked up at her, small and sleepy. Is he gone? She nodded. I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever again. He nestled into her side, and she kissed his forehead. And for the first time in weeks, she believed herself. It had been 10 days since Edward tried to come back. 10 days since Caroline hit him with a baseball bat and screamed loud enough to wake the whole building. 10 days since he vanished into the night, only to be caught 2 days later outside the city, trying to leave the state. The police found the key in his car. And the sketchpad, Oliver's drawing of the faceless man, tucked inside his glove compartment like a trophy. He was in custody now. Charged. Official. Real. There would be a trial. Probably a long one. But Caroline didn't care about that right now. She just cared about today. She and Oliver sat in the waiting room of a small, warmly lit office. Soft chairs. A little table with toys. A corner bookshelf stacked with picture books and stuffed animals. Oliver fidgeted with the sleeves of his hoodie. Caroline held his hand. Dr. Mason came out with a gentle smile. "Oliver? You ready, buddy?" Oliver looked up at Caroline. She nodded, squeezing his hand. He stood, quietly, and followed the doctor inside. Caroline watched him go. Her chest felt like it was made of glass, cracked in places, but still holding. Barely. Outside the center, spring had started to arrive. Buds on trees. Rain that actually smelled like renewal. Everything was fragile and growing, just like them. When Oliver came out 40 minutes later, he didn't say much. Just took her hand as they walked to the car. But later, at home, while eating pancakes for dinner, he looked up at her and said, "Dr. Mason said I'm brave." Caroline smiled. "You are." He poked his pancake. "But he also said, brave doesn't mean not scared." She set her fork down. "That's true. Brave means you do the hard thing, even when you're scared." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Were you scared when you yelled at Edward?" She thought about it. "Yes," she said softly. "But I was more scared of not protecting you." He nodded slowly, then added, "I don't think I liked him even from the beginning. I just didn't know if I was allowed to say." Caroline blinked, her heart twisting. "You are," she said. "Always. If someone makes you feel scared, even if they smile or bring presents or say nice things, you can tell me. And I'll believe you. Even if it's someone you like." She looked him in the eyes. "Especially then." That night, he left his bedroom door open again, but not out of fear. "Just in case you want to come check on me," he said, snuggling into the blankets. Caroline leaned against the doorframe and watched him for a long time. His breathing slowed. His body relaxed. There were still shadows in both of them. Still dreams they hadn't talked about. Still memories that would ache when touched. But the house felt different now. Not empty. Not haunted. Just theirs. 3 months later. The trial was over. Edward had taken a plea deal. He wouldn't be around for a long time. And when he got out, if he got out, there would be orders. Restrictions. A wall between him and the life he tried to sneak into. But even more than the legal boundaries, there was something stronger now, Caroline's awareness. Her instinct. Her refusal to ever doubt herself again. That would protect Oliver more than any paperwork ever could. Caroline stood in the kitchen, watching her son in the backyard through the open window. He was running with 2 other kids from his school, laughing, really laughing. The sound was light, unburdened, not the cautious kind he used to force when he thought adults expected it. She smiled. Spring had finally bloomed in full. The tree out back had blossoms now. The sun stayed out longer. There was life returning to everything, including them. That afternoon, she and Oliver planted a sunflower in the garden bed by the fence. "Why a sunflower?" he asked, digging into the dirt. "Because it turns toward the light," she said. "No matter what. Even on cloudy days, it still tries to find the sun." Oliver thought about that for a moment. Then nodded. "I want to be like that." Caroline touched his cheek, brushing away a smudge of soil. You already are. That evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, legs tucked under her, the air filled with the smell of damp grass and blooming lilacs. She thought about everything. The quiet horror of not knowing. The ache of almost losing her son in the slow, subtle grip of someone who wore kindness like a mask. The guilt. The rage. The realization that love isn't blind, it's the opposite. Love sees. And it listens, especially to the smallest voices. She thought about how easy it had been to question herself, and how dangerous that self-doubt could be. Not anymore. Now, she was listening. Always. Oliver came out just before bed, holding something behind his back. "What's that?" she asked. He smiled. "A picture." He handed it to her, shy but proud. It was simple, a sunny yard, a house, a stick-figure woman with long brown hair, a smaller figure holding her hand. But this time, there were no monsters. Just them. Safe. Together. Caroline felt tears sting the back of her eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. She pulled him close, held him for a long moment. "I love you," she whispered. "I know," he said, smiling into her shoulder. "I love you too." That night, as the moon rose above the rooftops, the house sat quiet and whole. There would always be shadows in the world. Always people who knew how to smile while hiding claws. But there would also be mothers who fight, children who heal, and homes that learn how to shine again. And some lights, once lit, never go out again.